Hi, so today we're going to talk about different cycles of action research. What are the cycles? How do you use them, etc. This seems to be quite difficult for a lot of students and even some of my colleagues to understand how action research unfolds. It's as clear as day to me, so let me try and make it clearer for you um, through the next couple of slides. Okay, the basic process of action research, all genres, as we saw before a couple of videos ago, is on the left there. You observe, okay, to identify the problem and you envision what it's going to be like if it's better. You develop a plan of action, so you observe, you plan, you develop a plan of action, and then you act. You collect data, you analyze the data and form conclusions, and then you reflect on it. You evaluate it. Has the action that we've taken improved the situation or not? If not, then you start all over again. And in action research, in a master's, for instance, you would only you could go on forever because things are never perfect. We say in action research that we don't come to actual final solutions. We never have a final answer because things are always changing. But we come to like maybe a moment of rest where we can say, okay, things are fine just now. So in a master's, you would probably do 2 cycles of that. Um, so that's an action research cycle. Now, if you look at Parlar, what they've done is the bottom one is basically the practice is actually that cycle. Um, you set your research questions, you determine your method, so you form an action plan, and then you reflect or analyze it and so on. But we have it in a figure 8 because we in Parlar has got action learning put in the middle, as I explained in another video. So you're working in a group with other people, and you're constantly reflecting on what have we learned. Are we still on track to reach our goals? Do we need to do something different? Do we need to learn something else? Do we need to develop more skills? Do we need to involve more people? And so the work of the top, and then you have to look at how are we acting together. So what is the context of the relationship is the focus on the top one. But these are happening simultaneously. Obviously, at the beginning of a research design and a parallel process, you focus a bit more on the upper circle before you actually move to action. But as you go on, these things are happening every time you meet. As you're doing the practice, which is similar to the diagram on the left, you're actually also checking in and checking out um, about your relationships, about the context, and about the ethical processes and so on. So it's quite straightforward to me, but let me just, people say, how do you then actually use it in a study? And you can make up your own cycles, as there are many sort of generic cycles, but you can make up your own to suit your own um, research questions. And I'm going to give you an example from one of my PhD students. I'll give her credit. It's Maiti Matikatela, who did a study. She's a teacher in a rural school, and she did a youth participatory action research project, which meant she worked with a group of youth in a school to look at how they could take action to make the school a better place, a more enabling place. They didn't feel very welcome or included or happy at school. There was a lot of things that were making school actually dysfunctional for them and unwelcoming. So their main research question was, how can we take action to make school a more enabling space? And that is, if you look at the big green arrow there, that is indicating that from between cycle 1, 2, and 3, it was progressively moving towards some kind of answer. So her cycle 1, in action research, you always start off with what is the situation like now? If you don't understand the situation now, how are you going to know what needs to change? So if you want to, I don't really want to go back to qualitative interpretive design, but this is why some people, I think, say, I first do an interpretive qualitative design to understand it, and then I move on to the action research. It's all part of it. The qualitative interpretive is subsumed into that. So I always say to my students, first, take your sub-research questions, which in her case, these are the aims she's got in here, your sub-research aims. First thing she had to do in cycle one was identify what was making school a disabling space. All right, and how did she do that? She went through an action research cycle. She observed. Um, she gathered data with her kids, her youth participants. What is it? What's going on now at the school? What are we unhappy about, etc. Um, what can we actually do? So she gathered data, that's observing, with them about that. Then they planned, okay, what can we do about that to um, raise awareness about these issues, or how can we these are the things we're saying that we're not happy with. How can we now plan to gather data to show that it actually is the case, and to convince others and to raise awareness in the school about that? So they planned, and they planned um, to do sorry then they, so that was their plan. They decided on how they would collect the data, which they chose to do drawings, photo voice, recorded their meetings, transcribed, and so on. And then they acted. They actually generated the data, they analyzed it, the drawings and the photo voice, and they reflected on it. And they said, now what can we do with is this a true reflection? And then they decided, after reflecting on it, that it was a true reflection of what they thought, but they also wanted to use it to raise awareness and take action to make school a more enabling space. So they didn't want to just identify the problem, they wanted to take action to solve it. So then they would move on to cycle two, which is the main aim there was taking action to make school an enabling space. And what they decided, they observed that, well, other learners and in the school and the teachers may not be aware of this, or maybe they are aware of it. Our experience is the same as them. So then they planned to share their experiences through a photo voice display, through doing a policy brief to give to the SGB, and certain other things. They took the data from cycle one and they used that to say, we're going to do these things to raise awareness and to actually try and take action and to get others involved with us to take action. So that was the acting part. And then they reflected on that. What's happened? How has this action that we've taken, and as I say, they did it through photo voice displays, the posters of the drawings, they made a policy brief, they had a sports event, um, they did a drama, they did some safe school advocacy, they created a system of hall passes, and so on. These are just some of the actions they took, and they evaluated the influence on the participants, on the learners, on the teachers, and on the school in general, on the policies in the school. And then, so the learners had she had worked with the learners to do this through cycle two, and then cycle three then was, how do we generate guidelines of about how youth can be effectively involved in making school an enabling space? And she made this a cycle three, um, and she reflected on the data, on the theory, and on the data, and going through that process as well, observing what she'd seen, planning, ideas and things, taking action to share her thesis, and reflecting on it. So you can either do two cycles, because most studies have at least two sub questions. Sometimes one cycle will address two sub questions. Or you can actually put the generation of your guidelines a cycle three as well. So it's up to you. But I hope it's clearer now how to do action research. I think if you just keep in mind that your sub-research question, you start off with identifying the issue, that'll be cycle 1. And then you take what you've learned from cycle 1. So you should have a reflection at the end of cycle 1 on how you're going to go into cycle 2. So they're not separate from each other. What you learn in one cycle determines what you will do in the next cycle. As these children at this school identified what was making them unhappy, and they had 4 themes. It was about, if I remember rightly, it was about infrastructure, the state of the toilets, the state of the classrooms. It made them feel undignified and so on, made them feel unvalued. And it was a safety issue. And the other issue was about there was no sports at the school. They didn't feel as though they belonged. There was no sense of, they were missing out of all the benefits that sport and exercise would give them. And the third issue was the social climate of the school. The teachers were very harsh with them. There was a lot of bullying, and so because they identified those issues, instead of just making the researcher now saying these are the problems, I recommend that the government should do this, the school should do this, the teacher should do this. As you would in a normal qualitative study, you move on to the second cycle of, okay, based on what we learned in cycle 1, what actions can we take to address each of those themes? And that's what they did. And then, as I said, you could then move on to another cycle if you wanted to, or to generate guidelines with your learners as well. Otherwise, you could just enter the 2 cycles, and cycle 3 would be your sort of last chapter where you generate the guidelines rather than make recommendations. In action research, we don't make recommendations because we don't believe that we have the right to say to other people, you need to do this and you should do this. We rather generate guidelines and then look at, well, as we were doing these studies, these are the research questions that emerge out of it that we still need to be researched, and you put them as questions rather than as recommendations. So I hope that's more clear to you now about what is an action research cycle, and good luck with your studies.